Welcome to the Casey catch up. It's been a little while again. Busy with dad duties and setting world records and state titles of stand up paddleboarding and all this other stuff. But I did this one about 2 weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago, with Erik Antonson from the Progression Project. Really cool chat. We broke down why and how he finally got into downwind SUP foiling and the pros and cons of it. We talked about his local spots, what's good about it, what's bad about it, and just we dive headfirst into downwind foiling, a little bit of surf foiling, and I had a really good time. Time went really quick. Ended up being almost a 2-hour chat. I think it was an hour and 47. So I won't ramble too long now, but I will be doing another podcast. I think Marcus is actually going to interview me about my 200-kilometer world record, and yeah, so keep your eyes peeled for that one. But yeah, excited to drop this one and enjoy. All right, stoked to get the Progression Project on the Casey catch up, and I think we're going to do a bit of a double release, so on both our, channels. And I'm really excited to chat to Erik. It's been about 18 months, and last time we chat, there was lots of talk about downwind stuff, but you were kind of the sponge soaking it in, and I've seen you now. You're putting it into practice. So cool.
Yeah. Well, what's really cool, James, is that I think you were the first foil guest I had on the show.
I think you're right. Yeah, it was. I remember us chatting. You're like, "Oh, they've done lots of SUP surf podcasts, but
yep."
And then the foil was it. And
yeah, I wonder when our first time we chatted was. It's got to be like 7-8 years ago at this point.
I think the podcast was probably, it wouldn't have been more than 5 years ago, because.
But you came on the first one. You came on the SUP podcast before that.
Oh, did I? I'm not sure I did.
Yeah.
A long time ago then.
Long time ago, yeah.
Yeah. Our paths have crossed a long way back. Yeah. It's pretty cool.
So what's your show?
Are you SUP surfing still?
No, not at all. Are you?
When the surf's good, I do.
Yeah.
Just mix it up, When the waves have been really good here, and it's I guess you live in Florida now, so why would you? But
yeah, there's no reason.
Yeah. Whereas in Sydney, we get good waves. And I'm sure you saw that recent swell. Josh Koo, one of the foil frothers, got wave of the day at Deadman's. Crazy.
That was insane.
So that day I was surfing. But I guess I wanted to get you on. We've been chatting for a while, and I'm like, and you've been trying to up your game for the downwind stuff, and I've been sort of prodding you, like, get on the SUP. You've got the skills already. Let's just transfer them over, and looks like you've done that. And so I guess I wanted to explore, the hardships, like what was really hard, what was the hardest part in learning, because you're very I'm going to say proficient, but you're like advanced foiler now compared to when we first chatted. You were learning, and now you're like ripping, which is awesome. But the trick, just because you're a ripper on a prone foil doesn't necessarily mean you can downwind foil. And basically, I want to chat to you about that.
Okay. Let's see here. What's the best way to start this? I guess downwind SUP for me has been a marriage of two skill sets while learning a third. So from our prone surfing, we got into doing runners. And in runners, you're hugging the coast, and Pedigo and I just did a show on them. If you want to learn about what we do in runners, that's a good place to reference. But you're running seams, which would be kind of downwind bumps, but a little bit more organized, a little bit more feeling the effect of the bottom, really close to shore, in and out of the surf. So using energy moving down the coastline to basically bounce from wave to wave. And at the beginning, it was just about longer surf waves, like endless point breaks. And then it started to get a little bit competitive with distance. And then when it started to get competitive with distance, we started looking at it a little bit differently. And I've said this on the show, but Kahi came out here and spent a day with us foiling. And he was approaching bumps so differently than anything that I had seen. And, the videos on Instagram or whatever don't do it justice necessarily. You're not getting to experience the minimal energy and all the little places of energy in between everything. And so that was the first thing that changed my mind that maybe our coast would have some downwind options on offer. So that was the first component of kind of this adventure. And then the second was SUP skills. And, Kalama was super rad and sent me out a board because we had been talking about, you and Dave have both been trying to get me into this now for like the last year.
Prodding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Prodding. Yeah. And so it took Dave just being like, hey, I've got a board. I'm going to send it to you. No strings, just see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
And, I didn't have a paddle. As much as I SUP surfed, I didn't have a paddle. I had to go out and buy a paddle.
Yeah.
So then I started going out on it, and, I did it a couple times, and it was cold. It was over the winter, and just out there by yourself, and just kind of didn't get into it. And then finally, I don't know what made me want to do it again, but I was like, all right, I'm going to take this on. Oh, I know what it was. It was winging. Mm-hmm. Being out that far off the coast and seeing how the energy in the ocean is organized so much differently and so much better. That's what got me thinking, okay, this is real. We can do this. I just have to start trying. And so I was pinging Dave for little tips here and there. And I think that the amount that I SUP surfed and the little boards that I used to ride helped tremendously, because that wasn't an issue at all. Like one day of paddling, I was like back to riding. I think it's probably about 100-liter board, a 6'4", 23. And so that all made sense to me. And then it was just about figuring out what you're catching and what to do. And TJ at Big Wind sent me a 1440 Takuma. And I had been going on pretty small wings and getting really frustrated. I'd thrown the paddle a few times. And I have a 3 F-bomb rule where if I'm winging or if I'm trying something new and it's like 3 meltdowns, I just go in. Yeah. And so I had that once or twice. And then the 1440 came, and it was one session after the 1440 that I started figuring out where the energy was, started getting up, and then it opened up the coast. And now it's like, I send it as much as possible.
Yeah. And I guess your progression is exactly what I'm coaching online and with crew locally trying to learn to downwind. And it's like, if you already know how to prone foil proficiently, do your shore runners, feel it. Just basically, you're just getting a really long wave, but you're also linking a few more swells. And like you mentioned, further at the sea, it's like almost more energy. I sort of describe shore runners, at least here, obviously conditions are different everywhere, but here in Sydney, Our beaches are only so long, 3 to 4 kilometers. So what's that, like 2 miles is sort of our longest one locally. And that the energy is really, obviously it depends on the depth, but the energy here, when a wave comes through, that wave has a lot of energy. And in between the 2 waves, there's like nothing. So, So for downwind, as I'm sure you know from your winging, when you go further out to sea, there's less pronounced swells. But that gap that's in between is full of opportunity. So shore running, I sort of describe as a good way to get into it, because it's like you're close to shore, you can just catch another wave easy enough. But it's actually in some ways harder if conditions aren't perfect, because I call it the desert in between the oasis of the wave. So it's like there's all this energy of the wave, and sometimes that's too much for the big wings. And then in between, it's like you're just like looking for energy, but there's nothing. Whereas it's like the next step I talk about is going winging way out to sea, because you have that safety blanket. If I come down, I can get back up easy. And just winging out in the ocean, you notice the difference of, a shore runner close to shore, there's heaps of energy and then nothing. Out to sea, it's like, oh, there's no energy out here. And I've chatted to a few guys saying it's not possible where I live. It's an ocean, but the bumps are just too small at the back. And I'm like, okay, you're on your way, but you're not quite seeing it yet. I'm like, just keep trying. And when you start to tap into those like tiny little chops, like the smallest ones are sometimes the best because they grow into big ones. And so like prone, shore runner, to wing, free winging, to then learning the SUP skills, or learning the SUP skills as you do that, then you're the light bulb moment comes. But it's kind of this progression, and some people have a hard time seeing it. And I guess when people say that, like when they live on a coastline with the big ocean, they say, oh, it's not possible to downwind here. I just shake my head. I'm like, it's possible everywhere. Like guys are downwinding in lakes in the middle of Europe, so it's so cool. Like I'm frothing to see it all get bigger and bigger, and more people are exploring it. And I think the fact, that you're doing podcasts talking about the downwinding too, when you started off just more of a surf foil, it's just going to get more people into it. So I'm stoked.
Yeah, it's so fun. And it's like the days that are good for downwind here are shit for surfing.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't really compete with anything. It might compete with the wing a little bit, but I'd much rather be just downwinding than winging.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that. So a lot of wingers would
Yeah.
sort of shake their head at that. Why would you prefer to wing than, downwind than wing?
So I think it depends on the day first, because
Mhm.
the last 2 days have been days that I've had an absolute blast on the wing, but it wasn't quite enough energy to be lit downwind to where you're working a lot. And I think that's the crossover point for me. Like, I like the wing a whole lot when there's just the good wind, but little bumps, early in the wind, or, we're getting sea breezes these last couple days. And so it starts coming up around 1 o'clock, and you've got a 14-mile-an-hour wind, by 3:30. And then you've got little bumps, but it's pretty hard.
It's like a
And
lot more pumping, and I guess,
yeah,
yeah,
you're not really gliding around a lot. You're like just searching. And I think so. What I've been doing on those days for training is anytime I can see white caps, I go out just to see what I can pop up in. And what's blowing my mind is I can pop up in pretty much on the 1440, which is a big foil, but I can pop up in pretty much anything now. So now I have a whole lot of confidence about sending it a lot farther offshore to start my runs.
yeah,
So
awesome.
that's really cool. Why I like downwinding more than I like winging is because I like the strategy of it. Like, I'm really enjoying like seeing. So I hate, like, you're a cardio guy, like you're a phenom in endurance sports, and
Yeah.
I've always been a sprinter, and I do not like going out. You're never going to find me go out and run 3 miles. I've never done that once in my life. I did cross country when I was in high school for one day, and I was like, this is terrible. I was on the swim team and just swam the 50 and the 100.
Yeah.
And the downwinding to me is a cool game, to where, like, I did a 2-mile run the other day and my heart rate was like topped out at 140, which is like really good for me. When, a shore runner, I'm hitting 175 like the entire time pretty
Yeah.
much, because you're working so much more. And so what that's let me see is that this is just going to give me a ton of time on foil. And I like that it turns more into strategy than just brute endurance, which is not my strength. And so I think that lends into it too. The wing is the same way, but the wing is, I don't know, I'm a surfer at heart, right? And so I still get those great surf moments on the downwind runs.
Yes.
But when I'm doing turns with the wing, it just always feels like the wing is there.
Yeah.
I'm not very good yet, but I don't know, maybe that goes away. But for me so far, I'm comfortable with a paddle in my hands, and I like those sections and
Yeah.
speed runs and all that. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, no, that's a good sort of, I guess, breakdown of it all. And I want to touch on something that you spoke before, like just in that winging. Like, a lot of the time here, if it's windy enough for people to wing, I'll be downwinding already. So the only reason I would wing over downwind most of the time is if on our coast we get swells from every direction, northeast to southwest, basically. And
Right.
if the wind is south and the swell is north, while it's very downwindable, the winging conditions are pretty epic, because you get certain reefs light up, and it's like towing, like proper epic waves. So, and that's when I've got to make a decision. And normally I choose downwind, but sometimes I'm out there and I see crew winging and these epic, like, sort of 4 to 6 foot offshore waves, and I'm like, damn it, it's not that good downwind today. It's sort of a cardio session, and it feels like training. And those are the days I'm like, damn, I wish I was winging. But I think you'll get to a point, and this is for those listening as well. You personally, I can get up much earlier with my paddle than I can with my wing.
I can too already. Yeah.
Yeah, already. Yeah, sure. Good.
Yeah.
So, and are you using the same? I guess the reason that normally is for me is because with the paddle, I'm probably using a bigger foil. But the other thing is the power I can generate with a paddle is way less reliant on wind. And it's like more about if there's little swells or little short period bumps, like I can paddle up. It's like paddle up easy. Whereas with a wing, you're like 100% relying on wind. So if you pump your wing and you've got no energy in the wing, it's like, man, this is so annoying. That's like the 3 F-bomb rule. Like, I've had so many sessions on the wing. I'm just like, throw this thing away. I'm like, man, why did I use such a small foil? Why did I use such a why'd I go winging today? I should have been downwinding, rah, rah, rah. And that's like so many times I've had that. And I think I've never been more frustrated winging than anything else. But
Me
I'm
too.
sure, yeah, hey, good. So it's not just me.
Yeah. No, it's everybody, man.
Yeah.
It's bad.
Yeah.
Winging is like the worst, especially because I wasn't in any way, shape, or form a wind sport guy before winging.
Yeah.
So, it was crazy.
It's the full on love hate, like wind sports, and in particular, like downwind. I don't necessarily call it a wind sport. I call it like a halfway between like surfing and wind sport. Whereas like winging, kiting, sailing, windsurfing, all that sort of stuff, that's reliant on wind. If it gets below, if it gets to 5 knots, you're cursing yourself.
Right.
Whereas with a paddle, 5 knots, you can get up and the bumps are still running. So that's why I really like the downwind stuff. And I've had far less F-bomb moments downwinding than I have winging. Winging is like,
once I have gotten the 1440 and kind of figured out like what to look for to chip. And that was probably of my learning curve. The foil helped a lot. And then like figuring out what energy to paddle for. I was paddling late, like at the beginning. I was like approaching it like I was going to catch a surf wave. And I've realized that that's not what you do. And now I kind of have a way to do it. And it seems to really work. And since I learned that, I haven't had any, knock on wood, I haven't had any shocker sessions on the downwind. I've gotten up every time I go, it doesn't like even like tiny little bumps. And I've also been practicing a whole lot and watching rigs, like just flat water starts.
Yeah.
And so, and let me ask you a question here real quick. So it seems to me like it is much easier to flat water start when it is perfectly flat than when there's just a little tiny bit of swell or bump. Is that true?
Fully true. And like to me, the perfect, like for those wanting to learn to flat water start, I kind of describe it as a party trick, but it's going to help you downwind. So like, don't feel like you need to actually get up in the flat to be able to downwind. It's not necessary. But in terms of doing the flat water start, the perfect conditions for flat water starts are like a lake, like flat water with a really strong breeze coming off the shore. So offshore breeze going obviously away from the coast. That direction is like but glassy. As soon as there's any little bump, timing comes into it. And that little bit of bump, and I'm going to show you a little image now. And like, this is from my course. Basically it's a 3-step guide to timing when you're paddling into bumps. And you want to start at the top of the bump. You can see this is our bump here. It's exaggerated. You're starting at the top when your nose is up, and then just sort of 2 long strokes. You're not sprinting it, but you're building momentum. And then the middle, when you're at the bottom of the trough, you start to really increase your strokes. You're increasing speed, you're increasing acceleration. And then when we start to get that tail lift, then we're trying to achieve liftoff. We're pumping, we're continuing to paddle. And basically the downhill is going to allow us to get that space between the nose and the water. So for flat water, what will happen is you'll, like, if a tiny little bump comes, it's nothing to do with the wind, or you haven't factored in a little bit of bump, you'll end up, when you're trying to get up, and nose high. And that's like paddling uphill is so hard. It's really hard to get that gap between the nose and the water, where, if you're running into something, whereas if you're running down something, the gap between the nose and the water is really easy to generate. So
yeah, one of the things that I've got a little weird feedback. Are you catching that at all? Does it sound weird?
I've got it all right.
Okay, cool. So I try to think about catching the trough before the bump I want. Like, that's what's in my mind. I see, usually it's like a two bump set. I'm like you said, I'm building momentum. I'm like generally already stroking just a little bit. I'm usually up paddling in the direction that I want to go, just basically like almost at like a 30-degree or 45-degree angle, so I can have like a lot of visibility on what's coming. And then when I see something that looks enticing, I turn straight downwind. And sometimes it's not directly downwind with our coast. Sometimes it's like almost on an angle where I'm trying to catch. On the smallest days, I've found that what works the best is to catch the wedge between the swell and a chop.
Yeah.
So I'm like pointing in the direction of that wedge instead of with the bump or with the swell.
Yeah.
And those days are hard though, because it seems like as soon as I start popping up, I never can stay on that bump. It seems like it's usually pretty small. I'm pumping and I have to connect to like the next, usually there's a wedge to the side of it. And I kind of like, those are pretty hard cardio starts too, because sometimes that can
Big
be a
time.
pretty long run. And
Yeah.
yeah, but
Yeah.
that's what's been working for me. It's cool that it sounds like that's what you're like
Yeah.
doing as well.
No, exactly. It's all about, and like I kind of, what you're talking about, like sort of, so you need to paddle sort of 30 degrees, or I sort of, yeah, probably the same. Like you're sort of going across the wind and sort of just using the peripheries to sort of see something coming. And while you don't
Right.
want to, like if it's a big set coming, you want to avoid that because those sets are just moving too fast. So we want to really try to look at, and basically they're too drawn out. It's like the shore runner thing. There's an energy and then there's a nothing and then there's another bit of energy. And basically that energy is moving too fast. So you can't tap into that just via
Yep.
paddling. Once you're up on foil, you can tap into that. But you got to, walk before you can run, get going first. So I'm
Yeah.
always looking for the shortest, steepest bumps. So like basically the closer the peaks are together to a point, and like the deeper that trough is, that the better it is to chip in. And even just yesterday I went out and the wind was like kind of like where I was launching, it was sort of cross offshore and the swell was east. So it was a southwest wind with an east swell. And
Right.
it's kind of, for us, it's the hard, or for me, it's the hardest conditions. And I was practicing on these sort of smaller foils, kind of 899 size, and paddling up, I struggled, and like probably the hardest I've struggled for a while, just because those conditions. Basically, the wind had almost zero fetch, like literally 300 meters fetch, and the swell was pretty solid and sort of 4 to 6 foot sets coming through and rolling sort of straight across it. So for me to get going, I actually just had to sort of paddle further out to sea, so that the southwest wind chops had grown. And then once that was the case, then I could sort of use a little bit of the swell as it came under me and then peel off into the wind chop to get going. So it was so it's like you got to forget the angle that you want to go to start with. Sometimes if the swell's small enough, you can kind of take off straight into shore, and the wind's going, let's say it's an east swell and you want to go south, then you can take off east, but end up going south once you're up on foil. So don't be locked into this. I was chatting to Josh Koo. I was talking about, he did an ocean run and really struggled. And he was saying, I just couldn't feel like the swell was moving one way and the wind was going the other way. And I was just trying to use the wind chop, because that's what I say, like just try to use the wind chop most of the time. But you can still tap into that swell energy when it comes through and sort of under you, run with it and see how long you can run with it and get the speed from it, and then peel off and try to tap back into the wind to keep you moving that sort of direction. So it's such a hard thing to explain, because all our conditions are so different. And like even the conditions I have today versus yesterday versus a week ago are also so different. Like that's kind of the beauty of downwind too. Every run is 100% different. There's pretty rare that's like, oh, it was just like yesterday. It's like, it'll never be like it was, or it's really hard. You get similar days, but the takeoff is definitely the hardest bit. And one of the things I want to touch on was, so you're saying you using the Kajira 1440, which it's a big foil, but it's not huge. It's not that big. Like there's much bigger ones. The guys I'm coaching are using foils that are more like 1800 square centimeters, and the 1440 is the square centimeters, right? That's So if you're learning, get your hands on the biggest foil you possibly can, because two things. One, it's going to be easy to get going, and there's nothing worse than doing a run and never getting up. So by using the biggest possible foil, you're guaranteed to get going, get up and foil. The other advantage of the big foil is you can practice your technique in the flat and have a pretty good shot at getting up in flat, which gives you a really good shot at getting up in the bumps too. The third reason the big foils are good is if you live where there's a few bays or lakes and the wind gets pretty strong, bay runs are the perfect way to dial your technique for downwind. Because like I was saying before, when you have swell and wind a different direction, really hard to get going. When you're in a bay, there's no swell generally. If it's a lake, there's no swell. It's all dependent on the wind. So if it's 30 to 40 knots across the lake and you go from one end of the lake to the other end of the lake, the only direction you can go and the only direction the swell will be going is the direction the wind's blowing. So it's like you're going to have, and it makes it super clean. It's like, I describe it as like sort of green runs, like it's a groomer. So it's a full-on groomer. You can just, and they're super fun, but they're only fun if you're using the right size foil. So matching your foil to the speed of the swells is so important. So I've done a run, a normal ocean run here. It's Long Reef to Palm Beach, and it's about 18 Ks. And I did that and I had an epic run. It was like 30 to 40 knots, south swell, south wind, epic. And then I finished at Palm Beach and I saw a few mates who were going for a bay run in Pittwater. And it was again 30 to 40 knots, epic bay run conditions as well. But I used the same equipment because I just finished my downwind run and jumped in the car and went up with them, did the bay run. And I literally got up and then I pumped the entire way down. And like, so it was like, you talk about cardio, this is like 8 kilometers. So it's like 4 or 5 miles of just paddling and pumping. And I'm like, there's nothing worse, guys. Why would I do that? I just had like the best ever run in the ocean. Then I come to the bay and I'm like, that sucked. And I knew right away then I'm like, okay, if I'm going to do an ocean run, small foils are great. If I'm going to do a bay run, forget about speed. Just go for the biggest foil you can still turn, and it's going to be epic. And since then, like for the GoFoil stuff, I was using like the GL 210 or the NL 220, and that was epic. And now with the Axis stuff, the 1150 is sort of massive and super fun, like easy to get going, glides well, you can turn it pretty well.
Is that an 1150 CM?
No, that's span. And let me get that's
okay.
And then the HVS 1050 was the other one I was using, and that's seriously epic to downwind and seriously surfy. The projected area of the 1150 is 1700 square centimeters. So that's what I'd recommend for those learning. That's the kind of ballpark area that I'd be aiming for.
So my goal right now is to drop foil size pretty quickly. So we had a run the other day. It was my only real prone downwinder, I would say. And it was after probably a couple weeks of really diving into downwind, and we got just the perfect day. It was 35 miles an hour, south-southwest, which for us is just like 10, 15 degrees offshore.
Mm-hmm.
So like nuking like good bumps that already formed and blowing you back out. So perfect runner conditions, but I wanted to see what it was like to do like a legit downwinder. So I took out the 1440 because I wanted to be pretty far offshore. And I run, I don't know, probably about 500 meters offshore is kind of like where like our ocean seems to like inside of that, the energy starts to dissipate and kind of bend more towards the beach, and offshore that it's like pretty pushes down the line, down the ocean, down the beach. I apologize. I got like 3 hours of sleep last night. So kind of and then I said it twice today. So I'm kind of a zombie right now.
You're doing well.
So it was solid, 7 feet, 7 seconds. So the chips were hard I rode the 1440. Chips were hard. It was like kind of, I wouldn't say barreling, but top to bottom,
Yeah, it's interesting that you say like 10 to 15 degrees offshore is like good downwind conditions for you, because for us, when it's that little bit offshore, like people would prefer a little bit onshore here. But I guess when the swell is bigger and the swell's pushing you in, personally, I like the little bit offshore because you can take the swells like straight into shore and you can easily glide back out. But what I find the disadvantage of those little bit offshore days is that the wind bumps are just smaller, especially if you're too close in. And because here we have lots of points, I guess, or headlands, that the fetch is like ruined every time you pass a headland. So that's why we want sort of cross shore or like a little bit cross on is usually like the best, because the wind bumps are better. Whereas offshore, there's no wind bumps unless you go a long way out to sea, and you're relying more on the swell, which if you're using a big foil, it's harder to stick with the swells.
So for us, those days usually rotate from southeast to south to southwest. Mm-hmm. So we had like rib high bumps, probably like 5 feet at 5 seconds, 3 seconds or something like that, coming basically straight from the south. So it was amazing. And what's crazy was that it was ridiculously easy to get really far offshore because with the wind and with those bumps and just
Yeah.
going right
Mm.
twice, I like looked back, I was like, oh my God, I'm like prone and I'm way out in the middle of the like sketch, right? I'm
Focus, focus, focus.
getting more comfortable with that. But what was scary was that the 7 foot at 7 second, once I got farther out, like out back, like offshore, the 1440 didn't want to catch them.
Yeah.
It was really hard to get on those. And so what I had to do was find, like when you see the seam running into like the bowl on the swell, I had to start pumping on the seam, building speed, and then like legit do a turn to catch the swell,
Yeah.
and then like pump with it because it was coming into a little bit of offshore too.
Yeah.
And it was like somewhat challenging to get back in. You could have gone as far as you wanted out to sea, but like, every, I don't know, 45 seconds, minute, I had to figure out a way to like work my way back in again.
Yeah.
But that was the best day I've seen here. And I did like a couple chips. I had to make the paddle a couple times. I blew it on a couple of those moments trying to catch the swell and stalled out kind of on the back of them.
Which
Those
happens a
paddles
lot.
suck.
That's kind of common, and I
Is
still
it?
find that. Yeah, so it's kind of thick because the swells are moving so quick, usually quicker than the wind bumps. You got to
Right.
almost think about turning earlier than you think, and like chase the uphill because the downhill is going to catch you really quick.
But I did like 8 miles that day, which was awesome in like,
Awesome.
I don't know, 3 or 4 chips.
Yeah.
It was, yeah, it was a brilliant day. It was so fun.
So are you using the 1440 like exclusively for downwind? That's your one foil you're using? Like
I decided to commit to that until I felt really comfortable with, I was trying to take away variables, right? So I committed to the 1440 and that is over now.
Yeah.
So the next day it's good. And this is what I was going to ask you here is, how would you approach working down? I mean, the 1095 is that is the most efficient foil that I ride. I love it. That's what I want to get to. Should I just start there? Like, do you think I'll be popping up on that without too much problem, or should I go to the 1210 first?
Okay, so first of all, great work. You started, like, you basically completed a run on the 1440 more or less, and like you're like, yep, I'm sweet, I can shift down. That's exactly the advice I'd say to people. Everyone wants to shift down all the time, and for those people in bay runs, I'd say, unless it's super windy, you're going to find a foil that's going to work for the bay run and sort of stick with that one. Move down, but very slowly. For ocean runs, it's a fair bit different because, like you experienced, was it today or yesterday? The swells, like if you can't tap into the swell energy, you can actually make it harder on a bigger foil in some instances, and especially if it's a little bit offshore. There's less of that wind bump, so it's like you kind of get stuck. And this is a story I tell my clients as well. You always want to start, like if it's just wind chop, definitely start with the bigger foil and slowly edge your way down. On some instances, when the swell's really big, I did a run from Manly to Palm Beach years ago, and I might have told you the story already, but I started on the Maliko 200 because I'm like, oh, I just want to make sure I can get up and get going because the swell's big. I don't want to come down and be in trouble. It was really hard on the Maliko 200 because the swells are moving so fast. And like I spoke about the shore runners, there was one peak here, and in between this massive trough, and in between the trough, the swells were so big, it was glassy. It was offshore in between them. So there was no wind chop at all. So while I could get up on the Maliko 200, once I was up, I was hanging onto the swells for as long as I could, and then having to pump and try to, like, as you said, sort of build up speed and get back onto the swells. And it was really hard. So I actually came in halfway at my place halfway along the run is where I live. And so I came in, I swapped foils to the Eva, paddled back out and continued the run and had a much better time. So that to me was the first time, okay, a smaller foil can be better.
Yeah.
In some instances, in some circumstances, but it's generally when the swell's pretty big. Well, and the wind's a little bit offshore.
So you obviously have way more experience than I do in this, but what I'm feeling is that I know the efficiency of like the 1095. I spend so much time on it, shore running it all the time. I know like the speed and the glide that I get out of it. And I know that like on a day like today, I don't know if I could have chipped the 1095. I doubt that I could have, but once I was up, I could have been just bouncing all over the place, barely pumping because I know how to keep speed on it, right? Like it's one of the things that we do. I call it like Florida ping pong, like on the inside, like we have a break on a sandbar and then there's a trough. And I love the days that it's like 2 feet, but kind of wind choppy because the bumps on the inside are like a foot. And the game I play is just see if I can get through the whole thing just on turns, no pumps. And, cause as long as you keep your speed up, just like, I look at like little power ups, like little wedges, you place your turns right. And then, you never have to pump if you do it right. And it's hard to navigate, but I look at downwinding very similarly, but the 1440 is too slow to play that game. So I have to pump. I can't like just bounce from chop to chop because it's losing speed through turns with a 1095 or a lift 120 is going to be gaining speed the whole time.
Yeah. Yes, actually interesting you said, and I think that might be the ocean effect, as in the swells are faster, and I guess it muddies your vision, I guess, when there's like big bumps and like smaller wind chops. And the advice I always give is the bumps you can't see, especially on the big foils, are going to be the best. So the bumps you can see, you're actually going to have to, on the big foils, you have to pump to stay with them. Whereas if you can tune in to the smaller bumps that you can only feel, they will actually build and turn into those big bumps. So instead of pumping, you'll get onto this one and your speed will build as it builds.
Yep.
Yeah. So, but when there's swell, it makes it all harder, which is why I always say, like I describe bay runs as your green runs, groomers, and then the ocean runs when there's a bit of swell in the water, especially when the swell's a different direction, is like your black diamond runs, because it's like there's moguls everywhere. Whereas, so it's just like harder to read. Sometimes when we go down like in the mountain, it's harder to read when there's bumps everywhere and it's no, moguls might even be cleaner than the ocean, when there's swell and wind, so so that's what, like, it's hard to say. And like I always say you're going to have more fun on a bigger foil when you're starting out. When you get to a point where you're making a full run on that, say like you're just making a full run on the 1440, and then you can think about trading down a size. And back to your question, like what should you do? I'd just go, if you have a 1210, like I'd just go use the 1210 first and just make sure that it's all working, and just do 1 or 2 runs and just make sure that, I can get up on that.
Yep.
Then go to the 1095, because if you just jump straight to the 1095 and have a horrible experience, then it's just going to make it like, it's one more horrible experience that you need to have. Whereas if you went to the 1210, figured it out, found the differences from the 1440 to the 1210, okay, this is what's different. Got to feel that. Yep, sweet. I can do a full run on the 1210. Great. Then go to the 1095. It's like they're stepping stones. And if you've got access to all, and this is always the thing, people are like, oh, more gear. And it's like, I'm always trying to get people to make the gear they have work. But there are just some instances where it's like, look, you got a Maliko 280. that foil works. You can get up and going, but it's got a cap on it. It goes pretty slow. So if you're looking to go on the ocean, try to do, if you can stay up the whole run on the Maliko 280, great. If you can paddle up the size down, it's going to be way better. So it's stepping stones is my advice. But if you've only got, say you've only got a 1440 and a 1095, and that is your stepping stone, you don't have access to the 1210, so you just drop down to it. And it might be a little bit harder. It might be seamless. And it's like, I always err on the side of caution in giving advice, because I don't want people to have a really shit time. Yeah.
I think the benefit here is that it's all beach and so you're pretty close. We don't have to deal with a lot of what you guys have to deal with. We don't get
stuck out deep.
No, I don't think that would happen. I just want to make sure that I got to pick the right day and just commit to going. The 1095 is where I want to be, just because I know how efficient that foil is. And I know that once I'm up on it, I just love surfing it too. So that's going to be so fun to dial in that.
The other thing I want to touch on, I guess people sort of talk about like, okay, I can link multiple waves on, say, the 1095. I can link them really well. For me, using the Axis ART stuff, say the 899, I love surfing it, but I can't, like, I can link for a long time. But if there's no wind, obviously that's easy. If it's a little bit of headwind or crosswind, it's a little bit harder, same as obviously always. But like the stall speed on those, like say the 799, I can link as well when there's energy. But what I'm trying to say is you're going faster when the wind's at your back,
Right.
So like when I'm in the surf using the 799 and I'm pumping around, sometimes I'll stall out because I run out of speed. If I downwind the 799, I'm not stalling out ever. Like I will keep my speed up the entire time. And while
Okay.
it's most of the time the 799 is a little bit too fast, except when the swell's really big, then it's crazy fast, really good foil to use downwind. I never feel like stalling out on the 799 when I'm downwinding, whereas when I'm in the surf, I will feel that stalling, close to stalling thing happening far more often. So I'm suggesting to some people who are progressing, like you can probably use a smaller foil than you think, but I always recommend stepping stones. And for me, like the 799 as an example, I've downwinded it a couple of times, and most of the time, if I'm using the 799, I wish I was on the 899 because the speed that I can hold in between the bumps is much better and more efficient. And also when I'm on the bumps, the 799, like I have to moderate my speed so much more because it wants to overtake and overtake. Whereas on the 899, it's like, or the 999, it settles on that bump and it's like you're matching the speed of that swell on the bump and the wind and all that stuff much better. So they're the two things that we're always fighting. So a big foil, you always feel like you want to go faster, but it teaches you to stay with the bump that you're on and sort of turning side to side or just cutting one way across the wind, turning back, cutting the other way across the wind, and you stay on the one bump. As you progress to faster foils, you'll feel the opposite problem. You're going too fast. And like to just prevent yourself from stalling, sometimes you've got to pump and paddle and continue your sort of trajectory faster than the bumps are running. And that's way worse than being overfoiled. Being underfoiled and having a pump is sucky. You've just done this car shuttle, you've made it, so it's going to be epic, and you go out there and your foil's moving too fast. And that is the worst possible experience because you're literally pumping the whole way down the coast. And then you have to drive back or run back or whatever it is. And there's no fun time in that.
I think that's what I've always felt because I always ride small foils for our runners. The 1095 is like the biggest foil that I would probably ride for it. Like Lift 120 is another one I ride a lot. And so that feeling of kind of navigating and playing that game is kind of my comfort zone. And right now, like the feeling of the 1440 where I get stuck on the top and I have to pump to get on the bump, like that's a weird feeling.
So what I recommend for that is like instead of trying to pump and matching the lines you're taking on the 1095 or the 120 is actually peel off back into the wind. Like instead of trying to go up and over the bump, like literally peel back and then like sort of set up on the one behind, and then maybe that's going to run too fast, peel back again and set up behind. And it sounds like you're doing that, but it's just like you acknowledge it's a different, you've got to change what you're looking at. So it's so cool. And like you can make a run completely different. Like if I'm using the 899 and then I go out and use the 1099, most of the time I actually have more fun on the 1099 because I can just stand there and sort of longboard, sort of glide. Whereas on the 899 or 999, I'm kind of like, if it's a little bit under, it's like you're hunting. You're like, oh, what, that one over there? And you go, shoo, and you go all the way there. It's like, oh, I disappeared. I'm going to go back this way. And you're always sort of hunting and you're like in between it. It's like if you're prone foiling in the surf and you're chasing sets out the back, and when you get to them, they disappear. It's kind of the analogy. Whereas if you're on like a nice slow foil, you just enjoy the one you're on. Oh, there's one at the back. I was going to glide out there, pick that one up. Now we're going again. So it's, there's different ways to downwind, different ways to prone foil, and they're all good, which is cool.
It's been really cool about this journey through, I guess, winging and then now in downwind is, and I talk about this like as something like called skill mapping, which is doing things that are similar to what you do, but a little bit different. I would still consider myself like a prone foiler. I mean, maybe that changes over the next year or so, but I mean, that's still like, if it's on, that's what I'm doing, but it's funny because when that's on, downwind's not on. When downwind's on, that's not on.
That's the beauty.
But it's the beauty of it. But it's crazy what spending so much time on foil and having to become efficient has done to my stance, my pump. Like I am much more solid on foil right now. I don't think that I'm that much better at surfing than I was a few months ago, but I'm much better at all the little pieces in between. because of just all that amount of time on foil and foot movement too. Like going back to the SUP, there's something beautiful about it. Like I forgot, like when so my trajectory in surfing was I was just a shortboarder until I found stand-up surfing, and because I hurt myself and had to do it for rehab, then I liked it. And like I never moved my feet when I surfed shortboard, really. Like I rode really small boards. They were pretty much planted from the moment I stood up till the moment I did some huge throwaway air. And then I got on a stand up and I learned all of this like nuance of foot movement. And then when I would shortboard, all of a sudden I was much better because of just the foot movement. And it's been kind of fun getting back on stand up just because I spent so much time on stand up. I have just all this like weird knowledge about paddling and stability, and it's really fun. Like I really enjoy just being on a stand up again, but I'm also enjoying like all of the foot movement that's happening and how comfortable I've always moved my feet on foils to some degree, but now I'm moving my feet like 5 times as much as I did before. I mean, in prone lines now, I'll move my feet in between every turn, bottom turn, top turn, and just because where those sweet spots are. And I really think that stand up and being on a big board that's so stable that it's like a cheat code to move your feet. It's like difficulty 1 of moving your feet around because the board has so much inertia, it just gives you time. And so that's been really cool. And then pumping big boards as well, there's so much more swing weight that each pump has to be kind of perfect. And I've found that it's just streamlined everything. And I actually really enjoy pumping that just huge Kalama now and can do pretty decent, just regular pump runs on it. Where at the beginning, the first time I paddled, I was like, I am never going to want to pump this thing. And now it's kind of fun,
Yeah, and the beauty of it becomes subconscious. If you ride the SUP enough and you're moving your feet, you then go back to your prone and like you're moving your feet on the SUP, you just do it. Like I don't think like when I changed to surf a wave to then pull off the back of the wave and pump out, that like you look back at videos and like, oh, I'm moving my feet a lot there. Like I don't even realize I was. And it's like, especially when I'm coaching, I've actually got to break down my own video to sort of give feedback to others. It's like, I don't know what I'm doing. It's just become ingrained in me now, but like, what is it I'm doing? Let's have a look at it. And then you can sort of give that advice. And it's, there's many benefits, I guess. And the other thing, I guess, for pumping the SUP, which I think is probably, maybe forgotten a bit too, is you have the paddle. So if you can take a paddle stroke, like you will never get as much energy from one paddle stroke than you can ever get from just pumping with your arms on a prone, so literally planting and propelling yourself past the paddle is like someone giving you a push on a prone board. It's like you're creating that energy forward again. So when you're close to stalling out, you take 1 or 2 paddle strokes and you're back up to speed again. Versus prone, it's like, where's the bump? Where's the wave? I need something other than my own momentum here. So
when you're close to stall speed, that's why I started my foil journey on a stand-up, and I got off the stand-up once I realized that I was pumping faster than I could paddle. So I was just carrying around the paddle most of the time. I was like, this is kind of dumb. And so, but yeah, one close to stall speed, it's such a cheat code. It's ridiculous.
And that's why for downwind, I think I was chatting to Jeremy and how he puts and Dave, they put their paddle on their back. And I'm like, yeah, that's great, but don't be telling everyone to do that when they're learning, because if you learn and you put your paddle on the back, then you're like, oh, I'm close to stalling, you're just going to stall out. Whereas like if you recognize that you're about to stall and like the reason they put it on their back is so that they don't use their paddle too much.
Right.
But they're also doing Maliko runs and Kihei runs where it's like a skate park the whole time and conditions are really good. So I understand why they do it. They're probably not stalling out very often. But for those that are learning the whole paddle on the back thing, look, it's great. And it's a cool thing to get the paddle out of your hands and have the hands free and make it feel more like prone foiling, I guess. And when you come down, you can always paddle back up. But having the paddle in one hand and just sort of holding it there and having the other hand free, you still got a fair bit of freedom. And when you do almost stall out, you can take that one stroke to prevent the stall. So, each to their own, but that's what I do. I keep it in one hand.
I mean, when I SUP foil, I use the paddle for swing weight, that's how I started SUP foiling. And so I kind of like it for turns where, you can swing it out and it kind of sets your turn in a little bit harder, or you can brace on it, just all this old SUP surf tricks too. So
for sure.
I don't know. Do you, TJ just sent me, thank you, TJ from Big Wins. It's coming on Friday, the Ono Ava paddle, which has a different
Yeah.
degree head.
Hmm.
Have you tried that yet? Is
I
that a
haven't.
cheap?
There's not many quick blades over here in Australia. I think there's only one
Okay.
shop up in Queensland. But I was chatting to Jeremy about it, and yeah. So I guess if our paddle is straight up and down, the shaft, and then think about the head of the shaft being either straight down, that'd be 0 degrees, and then like most paddles are somewhere between like 5 and 10 degrees.
Yep.
I think, and then I know the Ono Ava is more like 15 degrees. So like the angle is
And it's
like
huge.
huge, which I was chatting to Jerry about it and like looking at his footage and sort of discussing it with the guys I coach. It means two things. One, when we do our catch, it's going to create that little bit more lift. So because you have that positive angle, and then as you follow through, you've got a longer power phase in your stroke, which means basically you're just getting more bang for your buck every stroke.
Yep.
The reason, I guess, there must be a reason that most paddles aren't 15 degrees, because otherwise all sort of SUP paddles you think would already be doing that. And I think there is a point where it goes too far, because it must be not as efficient. But for SUP foiling, most of our strokes are just sprinting strokes, so we're probably not reaching out that far. So the 15 degrees is, like I said, maybe it seems to be a cheat code. The other
You only
thing,
need like 3 strokes if you're in the right spot, so like if they're more powerful. That's
the other thing to think about for the Ono Ava is the blade is freaking massive, like 2 times my head.
yeah.
So like the paddle I'm using is
Oh, hold
82
on.
square centimeters.
Just pulled out my mic. We're good. Or my headphones. I'm back.
Yeah, the paddle I'm using is about 82 square centimeters, whereas the Ono Ava I think is like 115 or something. Like it's
105 or 115, and he's sending me a 115. So that's huge. I used to paddle like a 72, like for SUP surfing, like the
yeah.
smallest little tiny quick blade. I like, because I mean, if you think about it though, they used to tear up my shoulders because you're putting so much torque on it. It's so different, just foiling with the paddle.
That's what I was going to say, is warm those shoulders up, because the 115 is going to be
Yeah.
The beauty of it is we're only taking somewhere between 10 and 20 strokes probably for the entire run. So
Right.
if you got 10 or 20 strokes and you're great, but when we SUP surf or even like SUP paddling, like racing sort of style, you're taking hundreds of thousands of strokes. So
Yeah.
that's why I guess the blades are smaller for SUP surf and SUP racing, and that's the theory I guess behind getting away with a bigger blade. My sponsor VNG Blades, I'm chatting to him trying to make me a bigger one, because my 82, like, while it feels great, I think for flat water starts like Jeremy's doing, a bigger blade just means extra power. Extra power means extra speed. Extra speeds means you're getting up earlier. So it's as simple as that.
Talk to me about your boards. Like, is Eric Foil's riding? Eric in Texas has one now, right?
Yeah, he had a production one, and I guess what we've been working on a fair bit, and the release date is May, June. So what we've done is the Aviator is our like SUP foil, and when we first came up with it 2 years ago now, the downwind scene wasn't that big a thing, and I was pushing to make the dimensions longer and skinnier, and they're like, we're not going to sell any of them. Let's make them a little bit wider and shorter so guys can use them in the surf. In the last 2 years, SUP foiling, I wouldn't say it's declined, but it certainly hasn't taken off. The downwind foiling seems to be on the uphill, starting to ramp up. So basically what we're doing now is we're coming up with a downwind specific version of the Aviator, and it's going to be longer, it's going to be skinnier. And like the Barracuda, long and skinny is just more efficient to get going, more speed. I was just chatting to the good question. I was just talking to a bunch of guys in my club about board design, and it's pretty interesting. And I want to talk about like the 52 Foil Co board, which is, I think it's like down in a 5 foot range, and it's 24 to 25 kind of wide. So it's like shorter and wider. Other end of the spectrum is the Kalama Barracuda, which is, I'm not sure if this is the actual dimensions, but I saw TJ posted 7'8" by 18.5, and maybe it's another curveball, but because what Dave said, it was 5 by 30 in his post.
He told me 5 by 30.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, basically we know it's long and skinny.
Right.
And so I guess the aviator that we've been working on, the Downwind aviator, is I'm using a 6'1" by 22.5. The next size up is 6'4" by 24. Then the next one's 6'7" by 25, and then there's a 6'10" by 26. And we
What
might
do
be
you weigh?
making. I'm 82 kilos, which is like 180 pounds, 85 pounds maybe. Yeah. So
Pretty
I'm
similar. About
so,
buck 90. So
yeah. So I'm the literage for mine is 85 liters. So it's just positive, volume. Yeah. And so that's something that I guess I know I can ride my old board was 79 liters and my SUP surfs are 77 liters. So I'm on negative volume and I can paddle around. That's like, obviously I'm not your regular SUP paddler. I'm like sort of sinking a little bit. And that's because when I compete, I need to be on a smaller board to, I guess, attack the wave more. For foiling, we sort of just use that number and like, oh, I know I can paddle around on that. And with the foil, it adds that little bit extra stability. I can get away with it. I think for flat water starts, more volume helps. I think for even bumpy, like foil starts, extra volume helps. But if you can get away with a small board, it's going to be nicer once you're up and running. It just means it's lighter. It means it's a little bit less thick. And that's, I guess, that's what we've gone with. And it's working for Marcus, who's designing them, and I. And the other thing, I guess, to talk about is the bottom shapes. If you look at the Kalamas, from what I've seen, they're pretty much a flat bottom with a big old chine coming into a pintail. The 52 Foil Co., the KT foil boards that Jeffrey and Finn are using, and the aviators, they seem to all have like, it's a double concave with like a V through the middle. And that, I think paddles, it's sort of the best of both worlds to me because it paddles really well. And you can get away with it being a little bit less volume for the stability kind of factor. So it's
you don't find that double concave is bad on touchdowns. Every board that I've had on double concave, it just kind of sucks when I don't mean it like they suck, but I mean like they
suctions
suck
on.
Yeah. I've gone to more like very light V and chined, and I like skipping when I'm hitting.
And I think it's, I guess I talk about it as a double concave, but it's a double concave with a V. So it's like a big old V through the middle. And then then it goes like a little sort of double concave through to the chine. So it's the V is bigger than the double concave, I guess. So it feels like to me that it skips. And I know exactly what you're talking about with the suction because we had a few prototype boards that felt more like that. And also just from SUP racing, like paddling, like flat water boards, there was a big sort of shift towards like a massive concave in them, and then you could go narrower. So basically the concave adds stability, but stability is always going to come at the cost of something. And so that suction is basically, that's it. But if what we found with Marcus's design this board with enough V in it, that the concave seems to do less. So while it adds the stability while you're paddling around, it doesn't create that suction while you're paddling around or when you touch down, which is, for me, I'm pretty happy with it. And I would always prefer to have a board that isn't as thick. Like the climber boards look like they're seriously thick.
5 or 6 inches. It's a big board. Yeah.
Whereas I think ours are more like 4 inches, 4 to 4.5. So to me, it feels like I'm closer to the foil. We made one board as a prototype and made it really thick, and it just felt like the mast was even longer. You know, it just thinks it feels like you're further away from the foil. So that's what people talk about, how long masts feel like a mast that's too long doesn't feel so nice. That's what I sort of feel with a thicker board.
What mast size do you ride on your downwind runs mostly?
So this is a good question as well. For those learning, you start with the shortest mast you can because it's going to be easy to get up and going. Once you can get up and going, you can start going longer. The reason I say you should start going longer is because, especially in the ocean where there's a little bit sort of messy conditions, if the swell's coming one way and the wind's going the other way, you're going to get clipped by the swell if you're on too short a mast. So for me, I was, with the GoFall stuff, I was pretty much running an 85 centimeters, which is a 32.5 inch. I tried the 36.5, but the extra weight felt too much and I was probably running too low. So I sort of stuck with the 32.5. I was about to then with Axis, I've got that their sizes are 90, 82, and 75. They sent me the 90 first, and well, I could paddle up on it easily, and it felt like I could turn really hard, but sort of just straight line pumping it wasn't as fast because I had to sit too high on the mast. I wasn't comfortable sitting that high above the water. So I then went to the 75 because I just got the 75 and the 80 at the same time. And going from 90 to 75 was 15 centimeters, a big jump. And I found I was either touching down or breaching too often. So because I didn't have that 15 centimeter buffer, the board was either bogging in the water, and while I wasn't falling off, it was touching and then releasing. Or I was breaching a wingtip because I was trying to run high. So I've settled on the 82 for the moment because basically I'm not touching down, I'm not breaching, and I can still turn pretty hard. And also I can paddle up easy enough on the 90. So it was like that's not a factor. So for those learning, a shorter mast can be easy to get up and going just because there's a little bit less weight, a little bit less drag, I guess. So you're going to get up easier. The foil's close to the water. And then it depends on conditions. So if I'm going to do a bay run and I want to go as fast as I can, I'll probably use a 75 centimeter mast. But if it's honking and the swell's massive and the wind's massive, I'd probably use the 90 because I can turn harder. I'm less likely to breach. Speed's not an issue because I'm probably trying to not go too fast a lot of the time. It's like almost towing when it's big like that. And I'm not going to fall off. So, but for most of the time, I prefer the 82.
Yeah, I'm on a 78, which when it's set up gives me 80. And that's my favorite size now for everything. I ride that in the surf. I love it in the surf because I get more bank. Yeah. If
it has the angle you get, like that's, I trade out with a few foil camps and I was trading out with a few crew, and a lot of them are riding like sort of sub 80 centimeter masts, so like more like 75 or 72. Yeah. And I'm like, I do it. I'm just breaching everywhere because I'll sort of bank over and the wingtip comes out and I'm just gone. No matter how good a wing breach is, if your mast is short and you're banking too hard, you're going to lose it.
Yep. Yeah. It hurt me in the foam though. Like the longer mast is a lot more difficult to kind of like tweak stuff out in the foam because you're just higher. Yep. And then all your angles are different. Maybe I get that. I think I just need bigger surf. But in the small surf, it's like I'm kind of coming out the back a lot now. Yeah. Like or I need a longer board because I kind of like catch the nose.
That's what I was going to say. I was just chatting to Josh Koo and I guess the guys I coach about this, the whitewater rebounds, which is totally off topic, but I want to talk about it. The whitewater rebounds, I guess I think about it like sort of two different versions. The first one is like staying above the whitewater the whole time and sort of foiling out of it. And then the second one is like doing a whitewater rebound and like you talked about having the wing come out the back. And I sort of talk about them as, blowtails. Yeah. I call them like a planned breach because you kind of, the foil's coming out, your board touches down, and then you foil out of it. Yeah. So you can't do a blowtail staying on foil the whole time. I don't think. I haven't seen anyone do it yet.
No, I always land on the foam. So I can hit the foam and then ride out at the bottom.
Yeah. But you can't blow the tail out.
Because you're stalling, you're inducing a stall.
Exactly.
And I mean, it's almost like a planned stall though, because you got the wave. Generally, I do them on connection turns or like steep sections, but like, you want to, like I like almost ollie off the bottom of the wave.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that I'm already getting my speed going the other way. And then I'm trying to time that throw. Like if there wasn't a wave there, you could still do the same thing. And it would just be like a big, like throwaway air type of deal.
Yeah. But with the wave there, you've got that, like that transition, that downhill. So when you, I guess, blow the tail out, you're almost like, if the wave,
you're trying to slam into it.
Exactly. You're like, that's why I talk about like a planned breach. Like you hit the whitewater and then you're planning to be nose down. If you touch the whitewater, then you foil out of it. So if you go too far nose down, you're actually going to nosedive. And if you go too far flat, you're actually going to get sort of, the foil's going to re-engage too early and you're going to get blown off the back. So it's like getting that angle right. And I've been watching your stuff. You're ripping that. It's sick. The blowtails are epic.
What's happened with the longer mast though, is that I'm nosediving a lot because you're coming in at this like much steeper angle. It's only like 3-4 inches difference.
It's a big difference. Yeah.
But it changes everything on that entry angle.
Yeah.
But it's worth it to be able to do the turns.
Yeah.
The turns are so much more fun.
The carving you can do on the longer mast is next level. Like you can fully lean it over and, sometimes your wingtip doesn't even come out, but your rail's almost touching down. It's like, I was chatting to Bennett's probably 2 years ago, and he was talking about how he's, using this short mast. I'm like, dude, you got to get on a long mast because you could be at it. Like you're already ripping, but you're going to be carving for way longer and harder. And like, look at him now. He's
Yeah.
like the turns he's doing, next level. And yeah.
He was the guy who convinced me to finally go longer
Mm.
because I like the 72, 75s. And he's like, dude, you have to just do it. And so I tried it. He was right. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's just different foiling, isn't it? Because on the shorter mast, you're like snappier,
Yep.
whereas the longer mast, you're just drawing those turns out a bit more. It's like more Parko.
It's something I've been thinking about a whole lot lately is like the phases of foiling. And I think it depends on where you come from. But for like shortboarders coming into foiling, I find that the first thing you want to do is like, oh man, I'm foiling. Now I can do all the same stuff that I was doing on a shortboard, but on a foil in a smaller wave. And so like if you watch people like Adam, like me, or like Tom Earl or Captain Froth a lot, like all the guys, like the lines, it's wider stance, it's really aggressive in the pocket, like very surf, like back-footed, like super back-footed. And then I think what starts to happen is you start to think about, wait a second, I can carry all the speed, I have all these advantages because I'm on foil. It's not exactly the same sport. And so you start like changing. And if you think about like what the final phase, I think, of foiling is, it's like people that have done it from first principles. So I think like Kiahi and Kane, if you look at Kane doesn't really foil like a shortboarder at all. He has approached foiling like he's flying an airplane under his 3 feet under his feet,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And it's incredibly efficient. Like he's so much more minimal than most guys. And Kiahi's the same way. And I attribute that for Kiahi to the fact that he probably spent a ridiculous amount of time on foils while kiting.
Yeah.
And then came into foiling with already understanding that. And he's an incredible shortboarder, but I don't think he would classify himself as a shortboarder.
He's a waterman.
Yeah. One of the world's
Ultimate.
best.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think that I think that's like the progression. Like even if you look at what Adam is doing now, he is doing the most, insane surf lines, but he's drawing them like a foiler, not like he probably was 3 years ago
When he was
riding the MFC gear. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's so cool.
The other guy to mention in that sort of line is Matt Foils from the Sunny Coast on the lift gear. He's full shortboarding, like big snaps in the pocket, and in between sort of weaving and just looking for those pockets. And yeah, like you said, like Bennett's is, and we're talking about the waterman. I think people that go from surfing to foiling, they're like becoming more waterman like less shortboard sort of mentality, and they're sort of broadening their horizon. And Kiahi and Kai Lenny are like the classic examples of that.
Zane.
But Zane, so many guys. But once you can open your mind to, and like you're becoming that now too, mate. Like you're winging, you're sup foiling downwind, you're surf foiling, and like understanding that. And this is what I think I spoke about last time. There's always conditions. It's pumping for everything all the time. There's always something that's going to suit. So I guess the point I want to make is even the different, like when I foil and surf, even if I was just surf foiling, I'll look at the conditions, and if it looks like it's good for pumping, I'll go out and I'll take out a big foil. Take out the 1099. If it looks like it's bigger and more surfy, I'll take out the 799. And I won't care if I don't link waves. I just want to catch the wave and just surf it as best I can, versus when it's sort of mushy, smaller stuff, or even downwind, you're looking at doing these smooth lines to connect and pump less. Whereas, so there's all these like almost sub disciplines within every single discipline, which I think is, that I was saying to my wife, I'm like, she's like, when are you going to have a day off? I'm like, there's never a day off. It's always pumping, And to be honest, the days that I've been having off are normally the light wind, glassy, pumping days of surf, because it's just too crowded. And I'll forego that. And then when the wind comes, I'll be out there for like 6 hours all day because it's no one out. And
there are no crowds anymore. Well, I haven't been frustrated from a crowd in probably a year and a half at this point. Like that's so incredible. Like it's not even something that bothers me. Like I never even think about it.
We're in this, like you talk about surfing in the 60s, we're in that for foiling right now. I truly believe that, because people talked about back then, you're driving up and down the coast and you're surfing like they surfed snapper and they surfed angari and they surfed all these spots to themselves. Now, if there's even a wave breaking at those spots, there's 50, 60 guys out. So it's like, it's pretty cool. Foiling now, we're kind of looking like, I'll call up mates like, Zane, what are you doing? Let's go for a foil, because you want to go share it with someone. So it's pretty cool right now. Where it's growing fast. And I think the advantage of foiling is there are so many spots that are extremely fun foil waves. And no matter how many people, it's like downwind is, I guess that's why I push it so hard. I can't imagine downwind foiling is ever going to get crowded.
I would love it if there were 30 guys that wanted to go every day, or 40 guys, because I'm out there most days, like right now anyways, like wish there was someone out here with me.
Yeah, fully. Like that's the same with me. I'm like, I could call Zane up all the time. Like, Zane, we're going downwind today. He's like, oh, I got work till now. I'm like, well, my window's here. Maybe we'll cross over. But it's
the hard part is that you have to have people that are a similar skill level, even with shore runners, or else you're just gone.
Exactly.
Or they're gone,
Yeah. And I guess that comes down, like for bay runs, I think it's probably going to, like for us here in Sydney, it's probably going to be more of the communal thing, because there will be a foil size that kind of fits perfect. Like if you're going fast in the bay run, you just like, you're being antisocial, you're not having more fun. Whereas on a like you want to actually, like Zane went out the other day with Josh and a couple of other guys I coach, and he went on the lift 200, and I think Josh was quicker than him on the Axis 1150. But Zane was like, dude, I wasn't racing, I was just surfing the whole way down the run. And that's where I think it's got like those really good conditions in enclosed waters are probably going to be like the party waves of downwinding. Whereas the ocean runs, I think that there's just so many variables and you can use so many different foils because of all the different speeds of bumps that are on offer, that I think it's always going to be just really spread out.
Yeah. I can't ever see it being crowded, which is a beautiful thing, because 10 years, it's going to be the same.
Yeah. Yeah. And
so
that's why, like, for me, like, that's why I've always wanted, like, my main focus for the foiling side of things has been the downwind, because surf foiling, it's just going to get more and more crowded, and it's going to grow as it is already. It has been. But downwind foiling, I guess if we can get more people downwind foiling, they're going to have exposure to those really good conditions, and it's never going to be too crowded. Whereas even here, sometimes, like, there's a few times where it's like, oh, a few too many foilers out today. There's like 10 guys sitting on one peak, and it's all fun. Everyone's frothing, but it's like, I might just let them go a little bit longer, and I'll go out when they come in. So it's, yeah.
What else should we touch on, James? What haven't we talked about?
I've been frothing. It's been good to catch up, mate.
Dude,
are you going to Hood River?
I want to.
Yeah,
I really want to. I've been, Dave keeps telling me that I should head out that way, and TJ keeps chirping on me. So
TJ is no doubt.
Yeah. So it might be late summer. Are you going?
I'm probably not. I'm doing a race up in northern Queensland, Cairns. It's called the Great Barrier Reef Ocean Challenge, and it's 2 races. One's like 18Ks, and the next weekend it's like a 40K. So it's like,
are they foil or are they?
Yeah, well, you can do whatever you want, but I want to foil it. I'll go up there with my foil and all my different size wings. So if it's super light, I'll use the 1150, and if it's super windy, I'll use the 899 probably. So it's the beauty of it up there is it's inside the reef. So if it's windy enough, probably not a lot of swell. It's just going to be super clean conditions from my understanding anyway. A friend of mine, Ben Tardru, did it a few years ago on a foil, and did he foil? He might not have foiled it. He supped it, downwind paddled it, and he said it was super fun, super clean bumps, and it wasn't even that windy when he did it. So I'm going to do a road trip up there and have fun with that race.
That'd be sick. That'd be sick. That I want to do Hood River and I want to do Maui. Those are the 2 trips that I'm frothing on.
The Molokai to Oahu race organisers are running that blue water race on Oahu, and it doesn't look perfect for a foil, but I think they're going to come up with a course that's going to be pretty cool. And so I guess I'm trying to steer the direct, like, get people to races, because if we support the races in foiling, then they will continue to accommodate races for foiling. Whereas if they run something and no one turns up, they're not going to continue with it. So, races like Hood River, races like Molokai to Oahu, the races on Maui, the races here locally in Australia, I guess everyone that does foil and wants to sort of downwind and have fun with a bunch of crew, there's no better place to do that than racing, because normally at a race, people arrive a few days before, you get a few runs in, and then you do the race with people and you get like the full on, like, hey, we're racing, you know, and you get a good idea of what speeds you're sort of running and where you're at with other people for those certain conditions. But it's just a good time and meeting new people. And yeah, I guess it's a good way to grow the community of it all, I guess.
Yeah, that'd be dope. I want to do a foil event in Florida because we have so much on offer here. You've got winging, prone, running, downwinding now.
Yeah.
And basically just do it like it's just a foiling week, but you hope to run a couple different events.
I think
This is
that's
probably a year or two off.
I
But
think that's
then
the best way
whatever
to
it
do
is,
it.
yeah, maybe it's a prone surf contest, or maybe it's downwind run, or maybe you get both in. I think that would be awesome.
Would be.
So
Actually,
just to get everybody together.
so yeah, I want you to do that. I'm going to hold you accountable now that you've said it.
Yeah.
But I think
Ryan and I and Pedigo keep talking about it, like the three of us.
just do like a week, because like a lot of the times, I
Yeah.
guess the problem is people do like a 1 day race and the wind doesn't turn up or the waves don't turn up and you're kind of stuck. Whereas this is what I was sort of saying before, people who foil are becoming watermen because there is always a condition that it's epic for. So whether it's, you know, howling onshore, go out in your wing. If it's howling offshore, you know, you can do, you know, you can always prone foil in the surf. If it's cross shore, downwind is epic. So it's, you know, and if there's no wind, you know, the surf's always going to be good too. So it's like you're kind of covering your bases for everything. And so for a week long event, even a weekend event, I think if there's no wind, it's a surf event. If there is wind, it's a downwind event. If it's onshore wind, it's a wing event. And you kind of like bring all the gear, guys, because it could be anything.
I think it'd be so good. And if it's super flat, we get Austin Tovey to take out his wake boat.
Yeah. Well,
try to do backflips with him.
Yeah. Well, the other thing, like, and even if you don't have a boat, like the amount of crew that are doing dock starts and beach starts is blowing my mind. Like
Yep.
for me, I sort of did, and I ticked the box. I'm like, yeah, I've done it before, but I'd always prefer to go on the surf or downwind. But there's crew that I guess don't have a surf background, don't have a wind background. They just think foiling looks cool and they're starting in the safety of flat water in a dock. And it's crazy to see the growth of that. And so even in the future, maybe there's going to be like you put a pontoon out there and you do dock starts and who can get the furthest, or who can do a race. It's like man on man either side of the dock, and you sort of dock start and continue. I don't know, like there's so many opportunities for foiling, and it doesn't just hit those, you know, shortboard surfers. It's not targeting just them. It's targeting wingers, or, you know, wind wankers. It's targeting flat water guys. It's sort of, you know, it's drawing from so many different parts of ocean sports and, you know, stuff that we love, but also things that we didn't even, like, people we wouldn't even associate with because we'd never meet them because we're doing completely different things. So it's pretty cool. And I think foiling, I was chatting to someone the other day and I said, do you think foiling will ever be bigger than surfing? And they're like, oh, nah, no way. And I'm like, I reckon it might be, because you got wing, you got dock flat water, you've got surf, you've got downwind, and you got those 4 disciplines where surfing only really has that sort of one pull. And while surfing is sort of...
What foiling does not have is it doesn't have the guy who can't surf at all, but likes walking down the beach with his surfboard and going on vacations. And foiling's never going to be that, because
that's true.
Dangerous. I mean, it's not it's not very dangerous, but in comparison, you can paddle out on a longboard, not catch any waves, paddle in, say you surfed.
Yeah.
And, you know, like that's like a thing.
And the surfboard's cheap too. Whereas I was thinking the equivalent to that is like an e-foil, but e-foils are too expensive to even put it in that category.
Are you guys seeing a lot of e-foils there?
Not heaps, but there's probably, like in our local area, there was probably only 1 or 2 guys a while ago, and now there's probably 5 or 6 guys now buzzing around. The foil drive's taken off a bit.
Yeah, have you tried it?
I love it. I use it a lot for coaching, and I want to use it. I want to like try downwind on a prone board with my 799 and see how that goes, because obviously prone board hard to get going, but with a full, like a big volume prone board anyway, foil drive in, and then just see how long I can go. That's on my list, my hit list. I got a long list, but that's in there.
What's on the list? Go through the list.
Oh, the list. I guess
Yeah.
I want to do more of the deflate downwinding. I haven't done that in a while. I want to foil 200 Ks. That's on the list.
Yep.
I want to go to
200 Ks without coming off foil.
Oh, I'll probably stop for food and water, because we're looking at 10 hours. I'll carry what I can.
Insane, even to think about.
It's a long way. Yeah. It's
insane. I did an hour on the wing yesterday, and my legs are a little sore today. You know, like
yeah. You got it's
nuts.
Actually, by the time I release this, I probably have announced it, but I'm probably going to be doing a that 200K foil within the next 2 weeks. Just waiting on conditions. I've organised a boat, and we're going to have like a live updates, and a bunch of media crew to sort of film it all and sort of.
Are you doing it for a cost?
More awareness, I guess. The costs have just gone out of control. It's hard to ask people for money and then say we're doing it for charity. So it's basically we're doing it to raise awareness for brain cancer, from what my dad passed away from. So
that's I was really sad to hear that, and something that, I mean, maybe we don't talk about now, but like we went through that. Sarah had, my wife had a crazy, and she got really lucky. We caught it, and it was.
Yeah, I remember, I think it was just after my dad was diagnosed. I saw that. Yeah, that's why you moved to Florida, right?
Yeah, that was five years ago now.
Maybe it was before. Yeah.
Yeah, that's why we moved to Florida. Yeah, but that's awesome that you're doing it for that. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, so I did the Molokai, the last, I guess, proper race I did, Molokai to Oahu. I raised money for Dad when he was alive, like brain cancer research when he was alive. And we talked about foiling like open ocean swells, like we're doing now. Like, and my dad was a legend, and he's like just such a creative mind. He was like, you should foil around Antarctica, get down to the roaring 40s. You just be able to get on one swell and just do loops of the And I'm like, Dad, maybe we do a couple of test runs first. I'm like, let's see if I can do like, a day up and down the coast of, around Sydney. And so that's what we're organising. But I also want to do Bass Strait. So either from Tasmania across to Victoria, and then the Great Australian Bight. So like Western Australia, basically across to South Australia, I guess. So that's my hit list, I guess, for the downwind foiling stuff. And I'm hoping this first, I guess, 200K, I think it's a world record, so I'm calling it a world record foil, 200Ks, and that'll sort of give me the confidence to do longer ones, and maybe it's multi-day sort of trips. But it's the hardest thing, I guess, for foiling is like a 12 hours of wind is hard to find,
right?
Normally,
but you're covering so much more ground. Have you been following what Casper's doing right now?
Yeah.
I mean, he's doing like 30 Ks, but you could, I mean, on downwind or on a wing, you could crush easy 30 Ks in, hour
and a half.
Yeah.
Like easily on and that's for sure. So I've got all these ideas in my head. Like, I'm watching Casper, and I'm like, man, even if it was like no wind on a big foil, you'd go quicker, but obviously you're expending more energy in multiple days. I love what Casper's doing. How cool is that, the adventure stuff?
So cool. I've been following the last few days.
Yeah, I check the captain's log each day.
I love that he called it the captain's log. It's always like, gonna have a beer.
Yeah. No, so cool. So yeah, that's on my hit list, and hopefully there's a whole bunch of I've got sponsors to put a bunch of stuff in. Axis was a major contributor, and we'll have a big boat, and we'll have social media updates for that. And probably by the time I release it, I'm hoping I've already done it, because I'm thinking next Friday. Maybe it'll be on the day. But
that'd be rad.
Yeah.
How's since our first times talking foiling, you've dived in head first now into all things foiling. How's it going? Like, obviously it's the most fun thing ever, but like, you seeing the market growing, the coaching growing, like all of that happening?
Yeah, big time. It's crazy how much it's grown. Like when I first started, I guess, my online coaching, it was mainly aimed at just the SUP race and SUP surf crew. And
Right.
since then, like in the last 2 years, like the foilers have come onto the, like, because I got a private Facebook page, and like it's like the foilers have hijacked it, and we're just going all foiling. And it's there's like, I guess foilers are such enthusiastic people, and they're like all in, and I got heaps of questions, I got heaps of feedback, and I guess I wasn't getting
Better
that from,
drug.
yeah, I wasn't getting that from the
drug addict, dude.
yeah, fully. I wasn't getting that from the SUP race crew. So like I've kind of shifted focus, and I'm about to launch the wing foil course. And that's sort of a market that's grown faster than I could have even imagined. I definitely wasn't one of the first ones to be wing foiling. I was definitely foiling, well, probably one of the first to foil in Australia, but wing foiling, it sort of popped up, and I was, you know, I was foiling and having fun downwind, and the wing came along, like, I kind of feel like I'm doing something like that already. And then I jumped on the wing stuff, and the crew that I've met winging, epic. And it's just like, it's a tool that can be used to help you downwinding, but also help you to tow into waves, and then also just sail, like, and just having fun in flat water, sailing back and forth, and working on tacks and jibes and jumps. And it's pretty fun. Like it's been super fun to write the course and go out and film the stuff. And yeah, it's such a cool community that's grown like in the last 5 years. It's crazy.
Yeah, I am still in amazement that it hasn't taken over Florida yet. I mean, we have a growing crew, but it's not. And what's crazy to me is that Florida is the place you should foil.
Yeah.
I mean, there is no surf. I mean, you get 3 epic days a year, 10 decent surf days a year, and the rest you're groveling.
Yeah.
And it's always fun on foil. And it's still just our crew. There's no one from like the hardcore surf crew that has gotten on a foil yet. And I just don't understand it. I mean, the uptake in California and Hawaii and Australia seems to be 10x what it is in Florida. And it seems like we need it more than anyone else.
Yeah. Percentage wise, I'd probably still say it's probably similar here. Like there's a lot of surfers that have foiled before, but with the summer and winter we've had, or the summer we've had just gone, the surf's been pumping. So all those guys that I guess were surfers that were foiling are now surfing a lot more than they're foiling, because the surf's been just like literally the surf's been epic. And when the surf's good, the best foil waves are just breaking. So it's like you almost have to decide, do I want to surf, 4 to 6 foot barrels, or do I want to go to this little corner where it's little mush burgers, but I want to foil, so it's super fun. So it's
right. Sort
of I tend to just choose the least crowded option. If it's no one out, I'll be in the surf, and if it's crowded, I'll go foil. So but yeah, it's interesting like that you say that, I guess, because here in Australia, like guys like Dean Morrison and Parko and all these guys are foiling. Mr. Bennett's was a pro surfer, so it's interesting that it's not. I think the biggest handbrake on getting people to get into foiling is probably just the cost of equipment, and it's a pretty steep learning curve.
Yeah, first couple sessions are pretty sketch.
Yeah. My uncle's a surfboard shaper, and he tried foiling about 4 years ago, so the equipment was still pretty lifty, I guess, not as nice as what it is now. And he tried it a few times, and then he got stitches in the head, and then a bunch of other people learnt to foil, and he's like, nah, it's not for me. It was cool when no one else was doing it. Now there's too many other people doing it, and I hurt myself, so I'm going to go back to surfing.
Because nobody surfs, and you never get hurt surfing.
Oh yeah. No, just some people it's ingrained within them, isn't it? Like the grumpy old shortboarder.
Yeah. I've never understood that. I really credit SUP surfing for opening like my mind to other surf sports.
I think that's the best way to explain it. Like you need like your gateway, your gateway drug to expand yourself to other things. My brother, we grew up together, obviously, and I got into the SUP stuff, and he was like, when we first started the SUP surfing, he SUP surfed with me, and then I sort of went and did the tour, the SUP race and the SUP surfing stuff, and he didn't. He was at uni, I think, and he always kite surfed, and I taught him to foil, and he's a pretty good foiler now. But every afternoon he just goes to North Narrabeen after work, does his 30 to 60 minute surf, comes in, and I always call him like, how was it? He goes, oh, it was all right. And I'm like, well, it sounded like it was a good foil day. He's like, oh, I don't want to foil. He's just like, he can foil, but he he's just, I think the allure of shortboarding is that some days are really good. Whereas because foiling, it's always good, always pumping. It's like people get a bit stale on it, I think. And maybe that's a thing, but it's like, I'm talking to the wrong person because you're definitely not stale. But I think like surfers, like my brother as an example, like he would agree that foiling is great, but for him, I think the handbrakes are the setup, and he's always borrowing my gear, so I usually leave him with a setup, but the setup is a bit of a pain in the ass to him. Having it in the back of his car takes up a bit more room versus the shortboard that he can just go to the same one spot every day. He knows he's going to get waves.
Does he rip?
He's a good surfer, but he's not a pro. Like he's right. Like he'd be competent anywhere he went out. Like he could surf any spot he wanted to. He did a trip around Australia and got some epic waves down in, all the way around up north in WA and South Australia. And so he's, he surfed with Mark Healy actually down in South Oz. Traded like tubes with him, and he was like, oh, it must have been the spot because he was here. So yeah, he's very talented. He could do anything he wanted, but yeah, he just goes out, surfs Northie every afternoon, and North Narrabeen's like it's probably the best wave in our area, but it's also the most crowded and most like the best surfers and sort of aggressive surfers are there too. I foiled out there on the point, and I wouldn't recommend foiling out there. If you're going to foil out there, definitely stay away from the main break where the surfers are, because they will yell at you.
Yeah, we don't have any of that here, which is beautiful.
I
mean, the spots that people surf here are the exact same as the spots that we foil. It's just they're not the spot. It's all the same sandbars basically.
Yeah,
it's so epic.
Yeah.
When I had to move back from Costa Rica, like I was as depressed as you could possibly be being a surfer, and basically just was like watch TV for a year. Like it was bad. And then foiling came along, and now it's like more fun here than it was living in Costa Rica. And that just blows my mind. I feel like it's just this karmic like gift somehow. Like we had to deal with a really hard situation, and everything felt like it all ended, and like we navigated it, and then all of a sudden it was like, here's foiling, enjoy.
Yeah.
Like, that's how it feels. Like, wow, this is awesome.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just so grateful every day.
Yeah, and I think that honestly is probably why that's why I'm confused it hasn't taken off more in Florida, I guess. But probably why in Sydney in the last 6 months we've had a lot of good surf, that it probably hasn't taken off as much as it maybe could have. Like I was hanging out for, as we're coming into summer, like heading into Christmas holidays and that sort of thing. I was hoping, I can't wait for summer. It's going to be onshore. It's going to be gutless waves. And across the road from me, there's like it's usually a shallow, if it's over 3 foot, it's a closeouts left and right. But if it's under 3 foot, it's like the perfect foil banks all the way up and down the beach. And so, but literally this whole last 3 months, there's been about 5 days where it's been good for foiling because the surf hasn't gotten smaller than like 3 foot for like 3 months. It's been either massive or pumping offshore or just too stormy. And then like 3 or 4 days in between systems where it's like, my foil heaven is back and I don't have to drive anywhere.
That's the other thing that's crazy, is that it used to be all about the surf trip. And now I don't feel the need to travel. I mean, there's trips that I want to do. It's more about just going out to be amongst the crew, like foil with everybody.
Yeah.
But it's not really about the need of surfing. It's like we just had a 4-day flat spell. And for the first 2 days, I was like, I can rest for a couple of days, because I send it pretty hard almost every day. By day 3, I was like, all right, let's go. And then
I'm recovered. Let's go.
Yeah, my wife's like, is there going to be waves? Like, you're in a really bad mood.
My wife said the same thing to me yesterday. I hadn't been in the water for like 3 days, and she was like, why are you so grumpy? Is it because you haven't left the house in 3 days? Because you because you had like a bit of a cold? And she's like, it wasn't COVID, but it was just a cold. And she's like, I think you're better. You should go out.
It's nice to have a partner that's super supportive of knowing that you need to be in the water and
Of our
do that.
addiction. Yeah.
Yeah, instead of like, what, you're going foiling again?
Yeah. No,
Like, yeah,
she's the
get out of
biggest
here.
legend. She
Go foil.
like drives me for downwinders all the time. She's like, yeah, is it windy? Maybe you should want to downwind today. And I'm like, perfect. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Sarah,
So,
my joke here is I've got two kids, Kemper and Damo. Damo foils all the time.
yeah,
And
he's ripping now. Yeah.
yeah, awesome. He's starting to do like legit runners with me now, and I'm thinking about getting him aboard to start doing the downwind. I think he's kind
There
of
you
ready
go. There's your
to do
buddy.
it.
You got a friend to downwind with. That's what I'm hoping
Yeah,
with my little fella.
yeah, it's the best. Like foiling with your kids is the best. I play music with my daughter, and I surf with Damo.
Awesome.
But the joke is, because Sarah, the kids have all these activities, and we got to drive around all the time, and Sarah does a lot of that. And my daughter plays volleyball, and it's like club, and it's like really intense. And like, but I joke with Sarah, is like, she has 3 kids because she's driving them to their practices and stuff, and she's driving me to like down the beach or picking up. Like the other day, she gave us a ride. We did an epic runner, and I think we had like 5 guys in the truck, and Sarah driving us down the beach, and it's a great picture of
That's
it.
exactly the same. So like when my wife fell pregnant, I'm like, oh, you're gonna have your second child, are you? Because
Yeah.
I'm like, don't forget about your first, all right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So to her credit, she's been very good so far. 1 month in, it's been good.
That's amazing. Congratulations, by the way.
Yeah, stoked. He's such a little cruiser. He's been good, little
That's
Cavey.
awesome.
Yeah.
Do you follow Pedigo on Instagram?
Yeah. Yeah.
You see him posting, I don't know if it's on his account or they have like a family account, but Banner, his kid's like 2 years old, raddest little, he's got him in a BMX bike now. And he's fully sending it like in the under 10 or like under 8 league. He like races with all these guys. And like, I feel like your kid's going to be the same way, just fully sending it. Like,
so many people have asked
check
me.
that out.
So many people have asked me if he's been on a foil yet. I'm like, oh, not yet. I'll get him in the pout soon, and maybe get out the foil drive and go on the lake with him, just to give him the taste of it.
Awesome. We had our daughter on a surfboard, like, like in the little 3-inch whitewater when she was like a 1 week old, sitting on a board, kind of like riding it.
So
it's awesome. You got a beautiful picture of it.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm really enjoying fatherhood so far. He's been a good little man, and I'm looking forward to growing up, having him grow up and do stuff with him. I hope he likes what I do.
Probably will.
Yeah,
probably, because it's such spending time in the ocean with your kids has got to be the best thing that there is.
Yeah, like me doing it with I was chatting to my wife, obviously, after my dad passed away, and I was like, we should have kids before we get too old. You don't want to, I don't want to be an old dad and not be able to do anything with them. So when I was 18, my dad was like sort of late 40s. So we went to Hawaii and surfed, all those spots in Maui, and Louis learned to kite surf together. He taught me to windsurf and all that stuff. It was like such good memories growing up, so it's like, I want to sort of recreate that with my little man now. So really.
It's awesome, man. Like we had kids pretty early, like we were 26, I guess, when we had Damo.
Yeah.
And like none of our friends did. And so our friends were still going out and partying, and we were just, hanging out, at the house with the 2 kids. And, but I was like, I know this is going to be amazing. Now they've all got young kids, and I'm just sending it with our kids, and it's so cool.
Full circle. It's so cool. It's an exciting journey, and it's cool to see you with your 2 kids doing stuff with them. That's what it's all about.
It's a little bit humbling though, because whatever it takes me like months to learn, Damo just gets it in like 2 sessions.
Yeah.
And so it's I think that I will not be the best foiler in our family probably within the next year. I think he's gonna catch up pretty quickly.
Oh, that's credit to you though. That's credit to you for teaching him.
Yeah, he just got the lift 9. The problem for him has been gear. He's been really held back by gear because it's all just, he weighs 100 pounds. And the lift 90, he just got it like a week ago. He had broken his foot, so he's only had a couple sessions on it, but he's just like, Dad, I can turn. Because he shortboards good, 13. Like, he's like, Dad, I can turn now. It's like, uh-oh, he's been able to pump like he's been on the 120, which was like the most efficient foil until that point.
Yeah, but that he'd be like, I found that when I was trying some of the lift stuff, I found I was maxing out on the 120 and like pretty small waves. So I can imagine he would have been majorly overdone. The 90 probably, he could probably go smaller again.
He probably could.
Yeah.
He probably could. We did a tow trip to Costa Rica with a buddy who lives down there where we used to live in February, and he was on the Cabrina 650 towing into like well overhead waves.
Yeah.
Like for me, that was epic. He was like amped out on that trip.
That's awesome.
Really cool.
Yeah, the tow stuff, I was working on some stuff with Axis, but the best stuff that the smallest foil I've used is the Lift 60, I think it is. And that thing was, Zane and I we had a good session on it. And I keep telling the Axis guys, I'm like, we need to make something small and fast, because it's just a matter of getting a small enough foil in those big waves. And it was the first time that I actually, was looking for, we were waiting for the sets, because on the medium to smaller size waves on that day, the Lift 60 was like stalling out for me.
Wow.
Which is, so I was like, okay, this is the blueprint that I think all foil brands should be looking at. So
I have a buddy who tows big waves all the time, and he has the Army 525 now.
Yeah.
HA, and he just chopped it a bit and is saying that he's got like tons of gear too, and been looking for that thing for bigger surf. And he's saying that's the best that he's found for like not maxing out in huge energy.
Awesome. Yeah, it's cool to see there's a shift towards that. I got a question for you. So flex,
and I got about 5 minutes.
Yeah,
I got to pick up my daughter from volleyball.
Yeah, it's fine. It should be quick. Flex on masts. So for big wave stuff and downwind, I would say definitely stiffer is better. For small wave stuff, which you're doing more of it than I am, but small wave surf foiling, where do you see flex?
I don't anymore.
Yeah.
I used to like flex, but I think that it was very difficult to differentiate what was attributed to flex and what was attributed to foil setup in general, like your front and tail, because there weren't options 2 years ago. So, like the MFC stuff, when I got on that, super flexy, I was like, but I was like, I kind of like flex. Well, I think I just liked the fact that those were like the first dihedral foils that I'd been on, and they surfed really good. And you're probably dealing with the flex, but it was still much better than what you were riding otherwise. And it hasn't been until I've been able to get on third-party masts and go apples to apples, Sadris, No Limits, Takuma, or whatever, I've had a couple of those opportunities now to really feel
what it is you're liking. Yeah.
Independently how this foil feels with different flex characteristics and different speeds, because the masts have different speeds as well. And I have found that I like something that is very stiff because it lets me trust it a lot more, especially with wider foils. And like I rode the GoFoil 140, I want to say
the GL 140. Yeah,
and that was a good foil. But I don't know now how much it was just like the first really solid setup that I had, because I think GoFoil is way stiffer than everything else. And so like I was always that foil always felt in control to me. The other thing that I think is a big deal is mast placement in regards to where it sits from the leading edge to the leading edge mast to foil.
Agreed.
And then also the chord and profile of the mast, and that acts as a fin. And so, like I could make a case in smaller surf for almost, if you have a pretty unstable, like the 1095 is not a stable foil at all. It like really is kind of like pitchy and weird. And on the Takuma carbon mast, it's almost unsurfable. I didn't like it when I first got it. And then I rode it on the Sadris and I was like, wait a second. It's like the mast added so much stability because of it being stiff. But I also feel like the fact that it was a thicker cord and a bigger mast and thicker in profile, it tracked better. So then all of a sudden I was like surfing, instead of kind of safety surfing it, I was surfing 100%. And now I've kind of landed on the No Limits because it's like fast and stiff and light. And now there's a guy that TJ is working with who's making a custom fuse for Takuma that's stiffer and that fits because Takuma is brilliant in their foils, but their stuff is just kind of all loose.
Yeah.
And now this isn't loose anymore. So now that's even more. So like, yeah, I'm a big fan of everything I want direct connection to what I'm doing. That was
Awesome.
a long answer, but
yeah, no, that's perfect. I'm just worried about your time, but yeah, definitely stiffer. That's to be honest, that's one of the reasons I signed with Axis. Like the stiff setup, like the setup is rock solid, and you can put a foil on there and you can know what it's going to do. Whereas I tried the unifoil stuff, and I could probably say that now, but it was a noodle. Like it was so soft, and they've stiffened it up since. I've chatted to PB, who's working for Unifoil now, and they fixed that up, which is awesome.
I'm doing that project with Uni right now, and so they have sent me. They have a new mast, which I guess I can talk about. That is much better.
Yeah, I was chatting to Josh, and he was saying the same thing. He just tried it, and he said it was like. He's like, what flex are you talking about? I'm like, that must be a new mask, because you know about the flex I was talking about.
Yep, it's and the one I'm on is an 83, which is a little longer than I like to ride. I have the 75 too, but it's the older version. I don't have the newer version of the 75. But also their production is really good just for their foils. It's like night and day. Because they sent me some of the older stuff that they had and some of the newer stuff, and just holding it. And I do not like flex. That was the first feedback that I gave.
Flex was like, Zane and I were testing Go Foil, Lift, Uni, and Axis, and like we literally after the first test with the Unifoil, we like changed a few things around. We pretty much like, that's unrideable. Like compared to this other stuff, like you can't even compare that. And it was not due to the foils themselves; it was the mast and the fuse. And like you literally set them up, and you like touched the tail wing, and the whole thing just like rocked around. And so it's so cool to hear that they've fixed that, and lots of brands are looking at fixing that, which is, I'm so excited for the sport of foiling, because it's like, yes, we're making progress, and everyone's dismissed the flex as a good thing, and agreed that flex is a bad thing and stiffness is what we want to do. I think if you want any flex in the future, like, because I think there is a little bit of flex that can be good in waves, I believe, but you'd want to have the flex controlled to just the foil itself, nothing else.
And I think it wouldn't even be, I think it would be non-linear in that I think that you want a very solid center of span, and then maybe have a little bit of flex at the wing. That's going to get into material science and different layups.
Yeah, but I think it's being looked at already, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, that's something that I've been thinking about for a little while, is like, there can be benefits to some motion, like to some flex, but and flex might not be the right word for that.
I think you're right. It's like almost like too stiff and you're like rattling around, versus like something that's comfortable and sort of sits into it, rather than you feel every little bump. Yeah,
like super high. I think in the next couple of years we're going to figure out, I say the foil industry. The foiling world is going to figure out how to make wider span wings roll better. And that's going to be, because I mean, the efficiency of like an 1125 is amazing, but I can't surf that thing.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, yeah.
I think that was a pretty good chat, mate. Like we had the downwind stuff at the start. We sort of went into a bit of surf foiling stuff, events, what sort of events are going to pop up. And we've sort of planted the seed for you and Pedigo, and then also other people around the world. And then talking about stiffness of setups and all that. I think we covered most bases. Pretty fun one.
Yeah, that was epic, dude. Thank you.
It's already time flying.
It's like
2 hours.
Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah. Approaching.
Send it, brother.
Yeah.
Enjoy your day. I'm going to bed.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for the time, mate. And yeah, exciting times. How good's foiling?
It's best.